Patreon, early access, YouTube. I got something good for you. I want to give something back to the white belts. It's been a while. I know my channel is primarily known as a probably advanced channel or an intermediate to advanced channel. So I wanted to do something that can help incorporate techniques and concepts for white belts and lower ranked jiu-jitsu players. Now, the thing when we think about like beginner stuff, there's tons of stuff on YouTube that detail how to do arm bars, how to do this for white belts, 5 moves for this. But I was looking at my analytics, I noticed, holy shit, my 5 techniques for white belt video is exponentially growing. So I said, okay, the algorithm's responding to that. I think the market is asking for more of that content. So let me give you guys a revised version of my 5 submissions for white belts. So once again, there's no particular order. These aren't the only submissions you can use. This is just 5 submissions that you can add to your game as a lower ranked belt. All right, so the first one we're gonna start off with is Kimura from close guard. So, I have Danny in my close guard, and I find myself in a scenario where he has his hands on me. Obviously, as I tell you guys, you gotta get the guy's hands off of you. I do that by raising my hips, pummeling my hands to the inside, and bringing my knees to the ground, towards my chest rather. When I notice his hands are on the mat, I then have the opportunity to start angling. So what we usually do is we sit up for Kimuras in this way, but let's face it, even if you're a white belt, who the fuck's landing that submission? You sit up, the guy pulls his arm right out, right? So a revised version is to go to what we call the clamp guard. You can do it as a white belt, it's not that complex. I get his hands on the mat, I have inside position, I put my foot on the mat and I run my hips towards his wrist. From here, I slide my knee inside on the opposite side and I clamp my knees together. I find myself in what we call the clamp guard. Now, the beautiful concept about this, the beautiful aspect rather of this position is I now have access to his arms and strangles as well. We'll talk about the Kimura first. So what I'm gonna do is when I bring my knee, my left knee towards my right knee, notice that I get my knee on the same side that my body resides on. So in other words, it's on the near side of his head. I don't want a situation where his head is in the inside of my legs and he can start to square up with me using his far shoulder. So I want to have my knee in front of his head and I want my knees clamping down on his rotator. From this position, I'm gonna start to push Danny's thumb towards my hip pocket, and then just with a false grip over his elbow, I create a great fulcrum where I can push his hand to the ceiling and get an incredible break right there. Obviously, if you feel like you need to, you can always interlock your hands and finish with a more traditional Kimura lock where you interlock your hands. Okay, so in this video, I'm giving you 5 submissions, right? 5 basic submissions. I should have announced that at the beginning. But I'm not going to nitpick and do this. You can always rewind. That's the beautiful thing about YouTube and Patreon. Make sure you guys rewind this to see the subtleties. If the guy's hands are on my body, I make sure that I get his hands up and to the ground. From here, since I have inside position, it's fairly easy for me, because his hands are on the mat, to run my hips towards his wrist. As soon as I get here, watch how my right knee comes to the inside, my left knee goes high on the shoulder, and I get my knee on the same side of my body, okay? That's an important detail. This is a crossface, essentially acting as a crossface. From here, we create a 90-degree angle in his wrist, and it's easy now to lock up the Kimura and get the break. 1 option. 2 options is to go wrist to wrist and to get the break from there. So Kimura, number 1 submission of the day for white belts and lower ranked belts. Next submission we'll look at, and since we've been working from the clamp, let's analyze that. I'm raising my hips up and getting his hands to the mat. I move my hips out an angle. I lock up to a clamp position. Now I notice, oh man, the guy's a pretty strong guy. Let's see what I can do. If I feel like as I'm going for the Kimura, it may not be very strong, whatever the case may be, I'm gonna reach for his head now. Now watch what I do with my left foot. My left foot kicks to the far shoulder. Okay? Now I have incredible posture control with my elbow inside of my knee. Now, white belts, pay attention, this is really easy. What's stopping me from triangling him? This arm. So I grab that wrist with a reverse grip and I extend my arm out. From here, all I want you guys to do is bring your knee to your chest and look where you end up in. A perfect triangle position where I can interlock my legs, get my hips in position, and lock up the full Omote Senkaku front triangle. So from here, when I lock, when I get his hands to the ground and I move my hips out at an angle, and I get my knees in position, particularly on this side of his head, which is favorable, if I feel for whatever reason I don't have the Kimura, this is what we dovetail it with. We go to we go to our triangle, okay? So first thing I wanna do is I wanna attach my hand to his head and I wanna get my heel on the far side, but above his shoulder. That's the key detail. Far shoulder, but in front of the shoulder. From here, we can create a reverse grip and lock our hand out. From here, my knee comes to my chest. I lock up to 3/4 Senkaku As he starts to drive into me, I get my hips off angle, I turn my knees out, and I get the strangle. Front triangle. That was number 2. We have the triangle, or the front triangle, the Mote Senkaku from closed guard. So I gave you guys 2 submissions, the Kimura and the front triangle from closed guard. Now you can say, oh, Steven, that's not a traditional white belt technique. Oh, sure it is, because it all operates from clamp guard. Anyone can do clamp guard. So don't diminish how effective that move can be, because it's not as traditional as one would think. Okay, we stabilize the position, and from that stabilized position we enter into our submissions, and they're all right there. They're all sequentially linked, very simply. So now I'm going to have Danny on his back, and I'm going to take the full mounted position. This is one of my favorites. I was just laughing with Danny before when we were. I was laughing with Danny before, saying, "Man, I don't really do the submission much anymore. I get it, but I use it to set up other positions. But when you're a beginner, this is like your holy grail. The Americana is your holy grail." So when I find that my training partner is crossing his arms like so, I'm going to attack the top arm. What we typically do for the Americana is we high-five him, and we got our elbow right on the outside of his ear. So what I want to get is my elbow attached to his shoulder, just like this. With my left hand now, I'm going to go under his elbow, and I'm going to go hand to hand. This is my biggest detail I like to talk about. I don't go wrist to wrist. I go hand to hand. You gain tremendous leverage by going to the end of the lever. From here, we pinch our elbows together. And one of the major details that we want to, so he has bent legs, right? The one thing we want to really focus on is making an active hook on his ankle. From this active hook, I now have the leverage to create space on my left side. So everyone does this wrong, right? They try to bend the arm from here, but there's no space for me to bend the arm. What I want to do is extend my right leg and offset my hips. I've now created all of this real estate where I can effectively lever the arm. Okay, so from here, once again, I extend my right leg back, I offset my hips, but I keep a vine on his right leg. Now, as I bring his elbow down, you get a guaranteed tap, incredible leverage. Now, for the newer white belts, you're probably thinking, or maybe blue belts watching this, Steve, why are you extending your right leg that far back? Can he put you back in any form of guard and retain guard? Not at all. The reason that he's not able to put me back in guard, any 3/4 guard, is because I have a vine on this leg. Now, if I would have the American lock, or not, doesn't really matter. But if I had this lock and I extended my right leg without hooking the vine on the side, sure, he can kick over, get to your side, kick over, trap my foot. Of course he can do that, right? Of course. But the defining detail is that I'm vining his leg with my left foot. So once again, from a cross position, I lock up hand to hand, lots of leverage here. I make a quick move, don't cut your training partner. Go underneath, go hand to hand, and pinch your elbows together. Make sure there's no daylight between your 2 elbows. From here, we make a hook on the leg, and we extend our right leg straight out, and we jostle our hips from squared to slightly to the right. Here and here. Now from this position, I move everything down, and typically just the action of me moving everything down creates a lot of tension in the rotator cuff, and you'll get your finish from the mounted position with the American lock. Arm bar now. Let's talk about the Jujigatame. We did this last time when talking about white belt submissions. We talked about the mounted arm lock. So I'm going to set it up the same, but I'm going to make some subtle adjustments. When I notice my opponent is crossing his arms in any way, I typically will attack the top arm. So in this case, it's Danny's right arm. I'm going to reach through, and I'm going to grab elbow connection with a false grip. Okay, this is a key detail now. With this false grip, it looks weak, but when Danny goes to pull this arm free, as I post on the mat, he's fighting this integral structure from hand to hand. So when he pulls, go ahead, it's really difficult to do. Okay, so that's an important detail. I make a false grip, I post. Now, as soon as I do that, I pull his elbow to the center line, and I get my left knee high on his head. As soon as I do that, I immediately enter into what I'm sure your instructors already told you, the S-mount position, where I fold my leg under his armpit on the far side. Now, these are the details we need to focus on. Once I create a 90-degree angle on his body, I immediately hook elbow to elbow. So take a look at this. From here, I hook elbow to elbow. I put my right elbow on the ground, on the outside of his hip, and watch how that naturally lifts his head slightly off the mat. Typically that happens. So because I'm so tight elbow to elbow, as I lean, his head comes slightly off the ground. We utilize that opportunity to go back heel with the left leg. So as I lean, his head comes up, I circle, and I back heel with my left leg. From this back heel position, it's easy now to raise my elbow to his thumb, go hand to wrist, and I can break his arm with a single grip on his wrist, driving my hips forward, back heeling, and arching my back. You get a nice break right there on the elbow joint. So Juji Gatami from the mount. Again, let's just move it this way. Just circle this side. You go ready. Once again, I make the cross grip, the false grip. I post on the mat. That's my leverage initially, but I have to immediately make an adjustment where I get his elbow past his center line. As soon as that happens, we get our left knee nice and high. That traps his arm in position. With a folding of my right leg, it's always easy for me to create tension between my left knee and my right heel. Web your hand in, you're gonna switch arms. Elbow to elbow connection will always give you ideal control of the arm, the primary arm you're trying to break. As my right elbow goes to the mat, it attaches to his hip. Watch his head. It raises, keep a defensive grip. Yeah, grab your bicep. As I go here, that happens. From this position, I hook through, I back heel, I raise my elbow to the top of his thumb, and then I lock. Hand to wrist, bridge, back heel, get your break. Arm bar or Juji Gatami from the full mount position. Number 5, okay, let's give you one more submission from the closed guard position, from top lock. So again, all beginners can do this. I added this one in because the reason I think it's so effective is when we enter into armbar scenarios, traditional armbar scenarios. So what I may have taught in my last video was more of like a traditional arm lock where you move your hips out in this way and circle the head, right? But as a beginner, it's really hard for you to move your hips in that way. And plus there's no control. You know, no one hits arm bars like that anymore, truthfully. So what we work on is controlling with a C-shaped grip on his elbow and controlling his posture with my right hand behind the crown of his head. From here, I want to get his elbow to the top of my sternum, and I want to lock up a top lock position. So what is a top lock? It's just me getting my left leg over his shoulder and crossing my feet. It's a fancy name for a high guard. So once again, this would be a traditional guard. All I'm doing is raising my left leg over his shoulder joint and reclosing. Now typically an arm bar, which would be for a white belt, would be an elbow to elbow connection, a 90-degree angle, and your arm bar would be there, right? I would circle the head, I would finish the arm bar. I have something that's even easier than that, and it works well for white belts. As I get my leg nice and high and I cross my feet, a white belt may not be confident. You may not be confident in moving your hips. So what I want you to do is keep back heeling, meaning driving your heel towards his back. Grab his hand and bend it at a 90-degree angle. All I want to do now is draw his knuckle towards you, the viewer. So as I draw his hand towards you, I'm also going to pinch my knees towards my logo behind me. So it's a contrarian motion of my knees going to the right, Danny's hand going to my left, and from here, you get an American lock from the top lock position, closed guard. Any white belt can hit that straight away. But the prerequisites go as this. I have to get his elbow in the middle, and I have to get his elbow above my waist. If his elbow's on my waist, I'm never gonna be able to get my legs up high enough to actually lock up the top lock. So always remember, I have to get his elbow proportioned relative to my sternum. Now, if he just postures up as I go for top lock, all is lost. So don't forget to keep your right hand behind his head. From here, we throw our legs into position, and now we're in business. We're gonna go 2-on-1 on the hand. We're gonna bend his arm at a 90-degree angle. As my knees turn towards the logo behind me, his hand turns towards you, the viewer, and you you gain tremendous leverage with the American lock. That's been your 5 submissions for all white belts. I branded it that way for the video, but realistically, it's for anyone who's a little bit newer to Jiu-Jitsu and you're trying to get acclimated with submissions and finishes. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Check out the Patreon. The Patreon link is in the first comment tag below, and it's pinned rather below, and it's also on my description of this video. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Subscribe. Check out the website, StephenWilliamsOfficial.com. Dan, you have anything you want to plug? Cop the merch. Oh yeah, the rash guards are on there too. Yeah, if you want to cop that. That's the Unknown Legend collection. Ooh! Anything you want to plug? Strangle Gang.
My favorite one. I touched you.
My fucking foot.
If done correct, none can defend.
Alright, let's see. So
I'm gonna punch my third arm now. Alright?